My special guest today is former Mayor Ken McClure. I can think of no one who has ever served as mayor of Springfield who came to the job better prepared. Ken spent his whole life as a public servant. He started his career as a budget analyst in the state Senate. He served many years on the Public Service Commission, where he was chairman. Because of his years of experience and political acumen, former Governor Matt Blunt chose him to be his chief of staff. When he moved back to Springfield, he held executive positions both with city utilities and Missouri State University. And he's just capped off all those years of public service by serving as mayor of Springfield for the past 8 years, a full-time job that paid him the princely salary of $200 per month. Ken joins me today to talk about the political landscape in Missouri and to share his reflections on the state of the city and the challenges and opportunities facing our community. Ken, welcome to In Our Town.
Tom, thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Yeah. So let's see, today's May 21. How long have you been out of office?
Well, I've been out of office a month ago today. April 21 was when I left office, so right at 4 weeks.
Okay. How you feeling?
I feel great. The best part of this title is former.
As you know, I served as mayor as well. I've always resisted the impulses to weigh in when I hear the council's going to do this or that. Do you have any of those?
I do not think I will have that issue. I've always tried to make it a point whenever I've left somewhere, for example, when I left the Public Service Commission, Governor Blunt's office, you've got to leave.
Right.
And whether you agree with what's going on or not, you've got to give your successors some room. And so I've made that a real goal of mine, and I don't think I'll have that problem.
Well, I follow that policy, but I still have the impulse.
Well, you still have an opinion on
Yes,
things.
that's right.
Well, I like this, I don't like that type of thing.
Well, as we're recording this today, the council has not yet voted on the new city manager. It looks like it's going to be David Cameron. What are the big challenges facing the mayor and council today?
Well, the biggest one, I think, immediately is going to be how to carry out the 3/4 cent sales tax, which the voters approved last November, a no tax increase, with a quarter of that going to the police fire pension fund, the other half cent going for other projects. And the voters approved it, strong vote, I think, but the immediate challenge is we've got a great opportunity to address a lot of needs in our community. The mechanism set up is going to be an advisory committee made up of citizens. Council, as it should, will have the ultimate decision-making authority. But that's going to be both the biggest challenge for a new city manager and mayor and council, as well as an opportunity, I think. So I want to watch that to see how it plays out, because we had to go through a lot of process to get this, and ultimately the voters agreed, but we've got to carry that out now.
And the method is different from how it was done in the past, where there was a laundry list of items, and so people knew what they were getting when they voted for it. What was the rationale for not following that procedure?
Well, we appointed a citizens committee last year, and they met for about 3 months. And there was a lot of talk, do you put projects out there or not? The committee ultimately decided not to, but to talk about examples where it might be used. There are so many things on there, and if you get too specific on some of that, then you start saying, I want my project in, or I want my project out. The compromise was, I'd have a citizens advisory committee appointed by and approved by council that would recommend specific projects after a period of review, and then council can do with it as it will choose. And I think that's ultimately the way it played out. It was so hard because of we've got a lot of good projects. I want money to go here, I want money to go there.
There's more good projects.
There's more good projects than we have dollars,
right.
Even though we have a funding source now. So, I stayed out of that committee process. I followed it very closely, but I intentionally, other than visiting with the co-chairs, just to talk about procedural matters, I stayed out of the substantive debate on that. I thought, we ask you to come in here for a reason. Now, let's, exercise your voices on that. So, I think they ended up doing the right thing, on that. You could be very specific on this type of thing. It will come out to that same result, I believe, once the advisory committee, which has already been appointed, by council, has yet to meet, I think, but once it starts going through that process, I think you will see a lot of different input on that, and they'll do the winnowing down.
How far out will they be designating projects?
Well, you have to do it on an annual basis. It'll generate about $30 million a year, but you can go out a little bit. The half-cent portion of this, which again generates $30 million, has a 10-year sunset. And so you can start planning out along those types of lines. But it's going to be an annual approach on that. Now, they can say, we want to use funds for the next 2 to 3 years for this or that. But I think ultimately it's going to be guided by that 10-year sunset.
Well, yeah, and I mean, so many of these projects, you do phase 1, then phase 2, and phase 3. How do you deal with a circumstance where something comes up 3 years from now, but hey, we've already got money earmarked for everything else?
Well, that's a good question. And do you backtrack on something? If I were doing it, I would say let's set some of this aside for a contingency savings account, if you will, because those types of things will happen, as you well know, and you've got to be able to react to those things. If you get too tight, you're not going to have the flexibility you need, and you're not going to have the projects done that need to be done.
And if you don't want to weigh in on this, I can understand. Okay. And again, lots of rumors going around, and the votes haven't been cast yet about the new city manager, but it seems, based upon what news has come out, that there's a divided council.
Appears that way.
Yes, and how is that just unavoidable nowadays?
Well, I hope not. I really hope not. A city of our size, I think, attracting a city manager, asking a person to come in and basically be the administrative head of our city, needs to have solid backing from council.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's a 5 to 4 vote.
If it's a 5 to 4 vote, then all it takes is one person flipping, and then you've got a problem. That's problematic to me.
What kind of candidate are you gonna get that'll take that job?
Well, that's a good question. Were I in that situation, I would not do it.
Right.
I wanna know that I would want a unanimous vote. If I were coming in as a city manager candidate, I'd say, I want a 9-0 vote to back me. And that's how I view it now. How others may view it differently, but that's my thought.
The way we would paper over those things when I was around is maybe, well, frankly, we were pretty lucky. It seemed to be pretty unanimous. I don't think it had much to do with the leadership, much more to do with luck. But if there was 1 or 2 holdouts, we would then say, well, how about now that we kind of know how things are breaking on Laguna Beach, let's just make this vote so-and-so in by acclamation, so you didn't bring them in under a cloud.
That's, there are a lot of ways to do that. And, when you go through all the number of applicants, not everyone likes the same candidates.
Sure.
And there's a lot of give and take in that type of thing.
Yeah.
When you get to this point, I followed the council meeting on Monday night and read what was said. I intentionally did not listen to it live, because I used to say to people, well, watch the council, you must not have much to do on Monday night. But I did read. That's distressing to me. It really is. And you've got to be able to, if you're a candidate coming in, particularly for a high-profile position like this one, an important one, you've got to have the solid backing of the council.
I like to talk as an old guy. I seem to, with a lot more yesterdays than tomorrows. think a lot about history and how things developed, and I guess that's because I got a lot more of that. But I think about in years past, didn't seem to be as difficult to get everybody to get along. And I don't know if we were just lucky. I think part of it had to do, though, with 30, 40 years ago, there were 2, 3 really strong media outlets, and everybody watched that. So while we may have different opinions, they were always based on the same set of facts. And now, the sources of information come from everywhere and frequently are not reliable. And so you get people, it's really much more difficult to develop a consensus. What do you think?
I totally agree, and I've noticed that even in the 8 years that I served as mayor, there's almost a dividing line, I think, in 2020 with the pandemic, and that helped change a lot of things. But social media out there, I think the 24-hour news channels used to be years ago when you and I were growing up. You would watch Walter Cronkite at 5:30.
And that's the way it is.
And that's the way it is. And as you said, we all got the same facts.
Yeah.
And so, okay, Walter said, here's what happened today, and so now what do we do? Now we have 24-hour news channels. You can find one to reach whatever political viewpoint you have, and it's all news all the time, and that's too much in my opinion.
And the other thing is, the companies that put that stuff out are incentivized to, in some cases, certainly to be less accurate if it draws more eyeballs to the screen,
They call it hits on the screen.
Yeah.
What the story that gets the hits is what generates it. And accuracy is, it's not there. And then you spend time having to correct misstatements, the facts that are not accurate. I'm very concerned about that, and it goes back even before my time in office, but we're moving that way as a nation, and I just don't like it.
How do you put the genie back in the bottle?
Well, you don't, I don't think. Ultimately, I'm glad to see, for example, there's legislation passed by the General Assembly that's going to require school districts to put cell phone policies in place. I like that.
Yeah.
Things that you can do to kind of, in my opinion, rein in social media's, the type of problems that it has. You've got to be able to get back to where you can have a solid set of facts, and then you can make your decisions based upon what we all agree on the facts. And I'm worried about that. I am very concerned about that.
I asked you about the challenges facing the council, and you mentioned implementing this 10-year capital improvements tax. But a big picture from a global perspective, and global in the sense of Springfield and surrounding communities, what can really make a difference on whether we progress nicely or we just tread water for the next 10 years? What things are out there that got to break the right way?
Well, a lot of things have to break. We have housing challenges here, and we're not unique. It's a nationwide problem, but it's not easy for people to buy a home, especially that first home. There's some good programs in place that are trying to encourage that, but we've got to get housing more affordable, more attainable. Then you have with that concerns that go, groups concerned about the tenants and the rights that they have, or the rights that are not being given them. We've had countless speakers in front of council during the last 18 months or so on that. So housing's a big problem.
Well, let me, if I may, push back on that just a little.
Sure.
Because, for the longest time, really the job of city government was public safety, transportation. We got taxes to support those kinds of things, health department. Housing, I agree, it's a problem here and it's a problem across the country. But, do we have the resources to effectively deal with that and really make a dent in the problem?
Well, you have, home loan facilities through our planning department, that's one. The private group that's been set up, Restore SGF, which is trying to focus on that, what they're calling the missing middle.
Like Richard Allis,
Richard
former
Allis,
councilman.
former councilman is heading that board. I think the city's role is to help to try to facilitate that. To your question, no, the resources aren't there, and nor should we do it. Council's got, a couple of things that it's weighing right now. One's a rental and inspection program. The other one is, do you, give tenants the right to counsel? Councilman Jensen's been advocating that for quite some time. Is that the role of the city? That's worthy of debate. And once you get past that, if you decide you want to do that, then where are the resources? What's that going to cost? And those are very, very legitimate questions.
Well, and, you know, in economics, they always talk about trade-offs. If you wanna do something, it's like hitting a billiard ball, it's gonna affect
It's gonna
something else,
yes.
you know,
Right.
and, free market, individuals argue the more, bureaucracy that, you impose on housing, the more likely it is that it could get more expensive, and rather than, having it, resulting in more housing in the city of Springfield, landlords just move out in the county.
You have, that's very.
And where they don't have to deal with that.
That's very real.
And,
Very real.
So, you know, you really need to think about the second and, stage and the third stage effects of these policies.
It has consequences.
It has
It
consequences.
has consequences.
You know, I remember, for example, years ago, there was a discussion along the same line, and it was the discussion in those days centered around what were called impact fees.
Yes.
Yeah, we would like to have new, housing and all that sort of thing, but that means new roads. So if you wanna put in a subdivision in the city, then you need to be paying for the sidewalks and, lots of different things like that. And, because it's not fair to the existing, resident taxpayer to have to subsidize that. But the flip side is, okay, if you get, too aggressive, then, they'll just, buy the land, a quarter mile on the other side of the city limits where they don't have those rules, and now you've encouraged sprawl.
Yes.
There's not a right answer.
Well, there's not, and like everything else, it's a balancing act.
Exactly right.
And trying to find that perfect middle, very difficult.
So, you know, these are questions that I'm still, as the old retired guy, still think about. I don't have answers for them, but I'm throwing them out at you,
No.
maybe you do. But it's, you know, how would you respond to, this question? There's been a lot of news, a lot of discussion about, there's not enough owner-occupied homes in the city of Springfield. Some smart aleck says, well, we also have 40,000, college students here. They're renters, would you rather not have them?
Yeah. I make that point frequently. Do I want to encourage home ownership? Absolutely. You want to encourage new homes to be built. But we have 40,000 to 45,000 college students in town between all public and private.
Right.
And that by itself is going to generate more rental facilities, apartments,
Absolutely.
places, that type of thing. And that to me is a net positive. And I have made that point several times as it's come up. You know, we only have 40% of our residents that own their homes, but we have 45,000 students, as you've referenced. That's a net positive for us.
I think
A
so.
big positive for us. And so you can't really say our number's too low. Now, would I like it to be higher? Yeah. If I wanna buy a home, I need to have the ability to go out and find one, get the down payment I need and that type of thing. And I think we ought to try to facilitate that. But I don't have that big of a problem. Some people do. I don't have that big of a problem with apartments or the duplexes, the missing middle in there that comes in. To me, that's part of the growth that helps us.
Well, and the other thing, Ken, is it's sort of a nationwide phenomenon. Younger people, for a variety of reasons, don't seem to be inclined to buy homes when they're younger, like you and I would.
No, they don't, and they're content to rent.
Mm-hmm.
There was a news story months ago I saw, the man that done very well for himself, never owned a home. He said, I've decided I'm going to have an apartment, my family's going to be raised in that, we're going to do it.
I do wish some of these younger men would move out of their parents' basement.
Their parents' home. At some point it gets down to that. But if you look, I'll take Missouri State as an example, but if you look around the campus now, of course, the campus is growing, but areas on the east side of National, which for years had old homes that were
Mm-hmm.
not in good repair, well, you've now got good-looking apartments there, good-looking opportunities. If you go down Kimbrough, south of, or north of Grand, that used to be a depressing drive. And I remember before I got on council, there was debate upon is any of that area blighted? Well, if it isn't, it should be.
Yeah, right.
But now you can go by there and you can find, if I were a student, I'd love to live in one of those types of things. Those are the good things that are happening, and then that helps the university with its growth patterns. I'm not worried, I don't have that concern, let's put it that way. Others of my former colleagues do, and I respect that, but to me, it's a balance, it really is.
Well, and, you're much more versed in politics than I am. What I've learned is the school of hard knocks.
That's the best school.
But you take Springfield, it's not any different than anywhere else. The people who, at a typical city election, 15% of vote. A little more, a little less, depending on what's on the ballot. And the people who vote tend to be older people, they're homeowners, they've got families here, they've lived here a long time, they're stakeholders in the community, and they care enough to be informed about what's going on.
They tend to be better informed.
That's right. And their most valuable possession is their home. So here's another question I want to pose to you. You have these people who are basically what I would call established neighborhoods. And they lived there for a long time, and it's their most precious asset. You have them on one side, and you have the development community on the other. And if you were a marriage counselor, how would you get these two groups to work together? Because they both don't seem very happy right now.
No, that's a big problem, and I've lost a lot of sleep over that in the last few years. You talk about, well, you've got to get people engaged earlier in talking. I don't know what the answer is. I will tell you, Steve Polkin did a deal a few weeks ago. He asked me about what would you do differently? There's
Right.
one vote I would have.
I know which one it is, and not all our viewers do. Why don't you tell
Well, the
them?
vote has to do with what's at the corner of Sunshine and National, and the white home there that had been there for years and years and was not in good repair. But it had been sold to a couple, I think, that was going to make it into a grandfather's house, similar to Ronald McDonald, where you had family members or loved ones in Mercy Hospital. You needed a place to stay, that's where you would go. And I originally thought that was a great idea. But we got so much neighborhood pushback. It was in some cases pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. And council voted 9-0 to deny it. And I was one of the 9. And looking back, hindsight's perfect, but I think had we improved that, one, that home would still be standing, would be in good repair, and I think it would bode well for the homes on either side of it. I wish we had done that. Steve asked asked me, he said, well, you're just one vote, I mean, that would change the outcome, but I think if we collectively had pushed back, if you've got enough council members to say, let's think this thing through, I think that would have set a good example. We've got a major issue that was on Chimney Hills out on the East Battlefield. That was, it's zoned single-family residential. And the developer filed a plat, and as you know, when you file a plat, that's typically.
There's not a lot of
There's
discretion.
not a discretion, it's a ministerial.
You're supposed to, if they
meet-
comply,
if they-
you're supposed to get the deal.
Yeah, you're supposed to get if they
The
meet
approval.
the checklist, and so, I spent a lot of time, I read the court cases, and other council members did as well, and I said, well, that's what's happened. I don't think I have a choice in this matter.
Right.
And so we approved that plat 8-1, and now there's, attempt to, get enough signatures and put it on a ballot for a referendum, and the city clerk's being sued now over that.
Yeah, there's a question whether.
Question of whether.
You can have a referendum on that.
As, the legal advice we got was, this is not subject to referendum because it's a ministerial act, but it gets down to, in this case, it's already zoned single-family residential, and the developers met all the requirements, but there was strong pushback in that area. I don't know I wish I knew what the answer was to that. It's not easy.
This may be too much real politics. I'm sure under your leadership, none of this sort of thing happened.
Well, that's, hindsight's perfect, you can say that, this wouldn't have happened under mine.
But, it seemed like when I was around, as you well know, not all our listeners do, but you have 4 zone councilmen, 4 at-large councilmen, and then of course the mayor's at-large. And if you're in a particular zone and your residents don't like it, you would get a pass. You vote for what they want.
I always, that's what I would advise the zone council members. And my rule of thumb, which I didn't always follow, was I'll tend to follow the lead of the zone council member. But, to your point, give the zone member the pass.
Right. He doesn't have to fall on his sword.
No, don't, that's not worth it. And that's why you have the general seat members versus the zone members.
Yeah, so I was a little surprised when I would see a zone councilman essentially vote against the people in his zone. I thought, man, that's political suicide.
Well, you've gotta be paying attention to what.
And some people, you gotta do at the end of the day what you think's the right thing, but, and I'm just here with my wife right now, I wish you were more of a principled guy, Tom, but you can't fall on your sword on everything.
I use the term pragmatic.
Pragmatic, yeah.
Pragmatic.
I mean, you gotta keep your eye on the ball and how you move things down, move the ball down the field. And if everybody got on their high horse, would there ever be any consensus? Would you ever make pass anything?
No, you've got to try to find that middle ground. And ultimately, that's, I use the term compromise a lot, and unfortunately, it's a dirty word now if you're an elected official. Compromise, you were giving up, and so I say, no, I'm talking about being pragmatic, trying to find that common ground, because compromise is how you get things done. But I also say, I'm not talking about compromising your deeply held beliefs, your personal core values. But if I think this way, you think this way, and if there's a way we can meet in the middle, we need to try to find it. And
exactly. Are you improving the situation over what it is now?
Exactly. And when I was on the Public Service Commission all those years ago, we had a joke, which was true. If we issued a decision and no one liked it, we probably made the right decision.
Yeah, that's what they say about lots of negotiations. If both people are walking out and unhappy, it was probably a good decision.
Good decision. Yeah.
So, another question is this, Springfield metropolitan statistical area is about 500,000 people. Inside the city, as you well know, there are around 170,000 people. But there are a lot of people, the majority of the people live in the area have a deep interest in what happens inside the city limits, but they have no say-so about it. And so that tends to have a reaction of, well, if I can't change anything, then why get involved in it? How do we address those issues?
Well, the first thing you have to do is to be strategic and push annexation. I think we probably have not been as aggressive as we should have over the years. The strategic plan, comprehensive plan does outline those areas that would be prime for annexation. That's gone slower than I would have liked.
What was impeding that?
Well, part of it was just getting the focus on areas that are surrounded by elements of the city. What can you do to focus on that? So we made a conscious decision. Let's get the plan done, and it will target areas where we need to go. So that the last 18 months, we've made several additions through annexation. We started with the areas that really are not controversial.
Well, in the city, by extending sewers in an area, has the right to bring them in whenever they want.
Yeah, exactly, you sure do. The consent annexations are the key. If you've got, so I ask our staff to, let's focus on consent annexation. People have already agreed to that.
Mm-hmm.
And we've done several in the last 6 to 9 months. But we've got to be much more aggressive. The annexation laws do not make it easy. If you take it to a vote of the people, it's got to be passed both outside and inside the city, and that's going to be a challenge. But to your point, I've been worried for years, even prior to my time on council, about those areas outside, to your point, that don't have a say in what they do, but they work here, they pay taxes, they're very involved, and where they come in, most of those areas would probably be in that better informed category.
Yeah.
Of where we need to go as a city. I wish, going back years and years ago, I wish we had been more aggressive, but that's predates.
Well, the argument
predates me and all of that.
I remember bringing up those same issues decades ago, and the argument in those days was, hey, if we expand our boundaries, under the law, we have the duty to extend services within a reasonable period of time, however that's defined.
Right.
But those people, so it's expensive, but those people are already coming into Springfield, spending their sales tax dollars, so it's a money-losing proposition for us. Why expand? And I mean, I get it.
No, I get that too, but on the other hand, we need to be a city that's got everyone in there.
Right.
In my opinion. I always thought you can handle strategically the fire, the police, the public works, things that you have to try to do. I get the argument of, well, it's money. If you base it on that, if we don't grow, then we go into a death spiral, in my opinion. We have got to continue to grow. And the way you're going to have to do that is look at those areas. Some of them are low-hanging fruit, some of them are pretty high.
And I doubt the law has changed. If it has, maybe correct me, but there's some perverse rules in the state law as well. For example, there's a county road and bridge tax.
Yes.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
And years ago, roughly 75% of the county road and bridge tax was generated inside the city limits of Springfield, but only 25% of the money ended up here.
Wow.
So our county commissioners, being political creatures, the good people of Springfield were paving roads out in Ash Grove.
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
And, it helped those guys get elected, but it really, well, it wasn't fair in my view at least.
No.
And, similarly, we may have, the city might, have a budget for, snow plowing. But because of, that money, if you live outside the city, the good people, of the city, residents, city of Springfield are, making sure your streets get, snow plowed more often.
Well, and that's actually the case. The county roads are plowed and, you know, residential areas.
So you can see why, maybe the getting, annexed isn't a good deal for me.
Well, you know, city utilities serves outside of the corporate limits. And
Right.
It's the only municipally owned utility that legally can do that.
I did not know that.
Well, it's the old Springfield Gas and Electric Company, which was an investor-owned utility.
Uh-huh.
And so when the city bought that in 1945, they bought the old SG&E territory, Springfield Gas and Electric. And so that was codified in state law. So you can legally do that. But there is a rate differential. If you live outside the city and you're a CU customer, you're gonna pay more for your natural gas and for your electricity than you would if you're inside. So that's, you know, that's an incentive of some sort. We need to probably, and it's probably been done, but, you know, what's the actual dollar and cents value? You know,
Right.
Where does it cost you more, where does it cost you less? What's it gonna cost the city to expand? But a good, you know, we have these fire protection districts all around, and,
If you wanna talk about a fiefdom, talk about a
well,
local fire protection.
one of our staff members made a very correct statement and said, you know, the opposition to annexation is going to come from the fire protection districts. And,
Right.
That was so true.
Right.
And a good example is if you go down on Blackman Road, there's a city fire station there, and just about 500 feet the other way is Logan Rogersville Fire Protection District.
So you're reducing their tax base when.
Exactly, and I get that, but on the other hand, this sounds a little harsh, but the fire protection districts, in my opinion, cannot drive annexation policy in the city of Springfield.
There's so many things we can talk about. A couple more, I don't wanna have you overstay, your kindness in coming here, but, I'd like to talk just briefly about your thoughts about, the form of government. We're kind of butting up against a size where a lot of cities will, change from a council manager form of government which we've had since 1953 to a strong mayor form of government. Arguments for that are, well, there's more political accountability. You know who's in charge. If you don't like the way the strong mayor is running things, you can vote him out, and he can cut the red tape. On the other hand, it's gonna be, if you go to that, it's probably gonna be partisan, and it's going to be, politics are gonna enter into it. It's gonna probably be more divisive, and you'll see some opportunism. Are we at the point that the pressures are gonna come so strong that we're gonna shift, or what do you think and what do you hope for?
Well, let me answer it this way. I don't think we ought to deviate from our council manager form of government. I do think we need to make some changes in the way that our mayor and council are compensated, if you will, how they act in things. I made two comments in my State of the City address last year, in June of last year. One is, it's probably time to have the debate on paying mayor and council something. I could not have done that job if I were not retired.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't need the money, the $200, you know, that's irrelevant. But there needs to be some sort of compensation in there to cover some of the inability of people to run. For example, I threw out pay the mayor $10,000, pay the council $7,500. Whether those are good numbers or not. The other thing I suggested was presiding officer and a voting member of council. I think it would be better if the mayor was the presiding officer but did not vote except for the case of the time. Many of our surrounding communities have that.
That's a usual way to do it.
And by having a vote, that means you have an opinion. And I tried my best to, even if I disagreed with what was out there, to play it down the middle in terms of presiding. I think those are some changes that we should probably make. Now, to go where you didn't go there, but let me go there. I do think it's time to look at the structure of our county government and how the city relates to that. For example, we have 3 commissioners. We have, 11 or 12 independently elected officials.
Right.
And we are a large county. And you look at other similarly situated ones, St. Charles, for example, Clay County, Platte County. That's going to be politically difficult to do. I would prefer that we go to a county executive type of thing where that person is elected. And that would be a partisan position. You may or may not have other elected officials in there, like your assessor or your collector or whatnot. But then the debate gets down to what's the city's role in that. And I understand that. They even in some talk, well, the city ought to be absorbed by the county or the county absorbed by the city, something like that. That would take a lot of work. I think it's time to have that discussion. We do have areas where we work together, the health departments join.
Right.
The parks, the library, there are areas where there's good cooperation. But if you take the city of Springfield, this goes back to your other point on county road tax. You take the city of Springfield out, the county is much different. And
It's got a totally different complexion.
And so, going where you were headed, I think there needs to be a larger discussion involving the county structure as well. If we're talking about changing how the city itself is governed, to me, the county ought to be a part of that discussion. Looking at that, because the form of government we have in our county does not, in my opinion, reflect the size and the influence that Green County has.
Yeah, because the area is more metropolitan than rural.
It is, and we hear a lot of people talk, well, we're becoming, going from a big town to a small city, and I think that's true, but it's also true in a different context with the county.
Actually, I looked into that years back, and there's a lot of, there's 2 ways you can do it. The people can petition to do that, but it takes an enormous number of petitioners to put it up, or the county commission could vote to do it. But you're asking the county commission to consider putting themselves out of a job.
Exactly, and how many elected officials in there.
Yeah, and but the way I recall that was to work, assuming you could even get to the point of considering it, you have to, I think there's I don't remember, something like a 13-member body, half are Democrats, half are Republicans. Then they study, they come up with a proposal. They have a year or 18 months to do so. And then they can come up with any form they want to, and then you put it to the voters and say if you want to do it. And it's, when, again, talking like the old guy that tells stories, I remember at one time, it's probably 30 years ago, and we had a really cold winter, cold snap. And one of our county commissioners had taken a space heater. Do you remember this?
No, I don't.
He'd taken a space heater home to heat up his house when everybody else was freezing, and a lot of people were really mad about it and said, we gotta change this form of government. But then spring came, it got warm, and everybody forgets about it. So you almost have to have a crisis and that's how the city, we got the council manager form of government back in '53 because the mayor and a couple councilmen had their hand in the till.
Well, and they abolished, they abolished the elected position of mayor, and that meant that yours and my predecessors were doing some things that they shouldn't have done.
Right.
But you know, you hit on the key point, Tom. I fear increased pressure to make these partisan elections. There's been legislation in the General Assembly, thankfully it's not going anywhere, that would first abolish the April elections and push it to either August or November, and secondly, to require that you declare your party.
Oh, I did not know that.
And that, I've fought that just about every year that I've been mayor. Thankfully, that's never gone anywhere. But I fear that, and I think it would not be good for candidate for mayor. I like our nonpartisan thing. Now, you may or may not know the party affiliation of your colleagues, but that's irrelevant.
Is there a Republican or Democrat pothole?
Well, that's right. When you fill the potholes, it doesn't matter what your politics are. I fear that. And I think I'll just go out and say it, the Greene County Central Republican Committee endorsed 2 candidates for school board. I thought that was totally out of bounds.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's.
Because for every action, there's an equal reaction.
There is,
and
and
it just,
I fear that. I value our nonpartisanship.
I do too.
I think that's crucial, and so whatever we end up doing, I don't wanna take any steps that's going to make it easier for it to be a partisan type thing.
Ken, I'm gonna have to ask you to come back again, because there's so many other topics that I think deserve attention and discussion. I wanna thank you today.
It's been my honor, Tom, thank you.
And I just must say, you know, I've been a keen observer of city government for a long time, and I can't think of anybody who comported himself more professionally and brought honor in our community than you did.
Well, you're kind to say that, I appreciate that very much. But as I've told you too, I've looked on you as my guiding light on
Oh,
that.
come on.
No, you know, you were mayor when I came back, to Springfield, and I've watched how you have done things, and so that's really been a guide for me.
Well, you're very kind. Thank you for being my guest today in our town.
My pleasure.
Good. That was fun.